Okay, welcome everybody. Can I just confirm Louise, who we've got on the live stream, on the Zoom, sorry.
Yes, so we have Graham Clark, Councillor Penny Marriott, we've got legal representative Stephen Ricks, Councillor Jerry Hyman, and that's it.
Thank you, Louise. Penny, the slight complication of this is because it's a formal meeting of the executive, Councillor Marriott. I'm afraid I won't be able to recognise you officially on the call.
Okay.
And I'm afraid that legal advice is on such matters that I'd be introducing potential risk if I start to bring in people who could influence the decision making who aren't present in the room. So
yeah, that's fine.
My apologies, but I'll have to pretend you aren't there officially. Okay, in which case we move to the opening of this meeting, the special meeting of the executive. At some point, I'll have to ask officers the difference between a special and an extraordinary executive, just for my own benefit. But my name is Councillor Paul Follows, and I'm chairman of the executive. And this is a special executive to discuss one item regarding UCOG and the matter at Loxley Well. Apologies for absence, Louise.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillors Palmer and Miranese.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest, anyone? No, thank you. In which case, we move then to item 3. Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams.
I think I probably need to declare an interest in that I'm the subject of litigation by UK Oil and Gas Limited.
Fair enough, although that is under the legal umbrella of Waverley Borough Council also, and personal view is it would not prejudice your attendance.
No.
Okay, in which case, the primary item before us is item 3, the urgent item, Loxley Well. I would just advise members that a significant portion of this is the legal advice is exempt, and if you're going to be referring to, and I believe it's Annex 3, that can only be referred to in exempt. There is an item 5, which will be to note on the legal advice, where I would advise any matters regarding that legal advice be raised. In which case, I'm going to go straight into introduce item 3. I will have one speaker on this, Councillor Jerry Hyman, who I will bring in following my own introduction to this item. So first of all, thank you all for attending this today. In many respects, this is an appropriate day for us to be discussing this matter, a day of record-breaking temperatures throughout the UK. Waverley has had a long history of engagement with this matter and an equally long history of objection that I'm sure others will go into in greater depth. As all of you here know, through our significant discussions we've had as an executive, this next stage of potential action is something I've been personally wrestling with since the perverse decision of the Secretary of State to allow this application to proceed on appeal. Where any use of public money is involved, though, I believe we have a moral duty to wrestle with that decision. And this should not be a flippant or emotive choice, and it needs to be considered properly and needs to be balanced against the clearly articulated views of this council. The decision of the Secretary of State was disappointing to many of us, all of us, I think, but in many ways was not a surprise either. The government at present seems to be having a bit of an identity crisis, and certainly if you watch any of the debates going on at the moment on TV, they certainly seem to be having a bit of an identity crisis about net zero, about energy strategy, and about the economic situation in the country in general at present. And I would say locally, we are paying the price of that. But we here at Waverley have in our corporate strategy clear elements that are there to guide us. Firstly, we've declared a climate emergency and have committed to defending our local environment. We've committed to supporting our local economy and local businesses, and we've committed to engage and hear and listen to our residents. And I would also add that we also have a local plan and set of obligations that go with it of material importance in this area too. Now, in my view, and having been present for our local listening panel, attended both the sessions at Surrey County Council where this was discussed, and then, of course, the appeal itself, the decision of the Secretary of State clearly has significant and intolerable impact upon our local environment, upon our local businesses, and is clearly against the wishes of those residents most local to Dunsfold, and I believe a clear majority of the residents of Waverley at large. We must consider the significant impact on the whole of Waverley that is caused by threatening progress for housing at the nearby aerodrome, and is fundamentally incompatible with the Garden Village status that goes along with it. This ultimately means the decision of the Secretary of State is material to our 5-year housing land supply also. Now, all of this taken on board, I absolutely do not wish to be cavalier or reckless in what we do next. And as such, I present to you here today a measured and structured approach to this matter going forward, authorising only the funding to get Waverley Borough Council to the stage of confirmation with the court that our arguments can be heard. If we are successful in this endeavour, we would then expand that work with potential partners, other local stakeholders, and ideally Surrey County Council to move this matter forward together as a group. It is at that point I will open it to the rest of the executive for comment. I will go to the first speaker also registered before I do that, Councillor Hyman. But I obviously urge you to take seriously the matter that we've got here before us. I think a weighty decision between the balance of the use of public money and defence of the values which our residents expect us to defend. At that point, Councillor Jerry Hyman, you've registered to speak, so I'll bring you in first.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Jerry, thank you.
Great. I'm slightly concerned in respect of the decision-making process. As you say, I would obviously fully agree. We've got a moral duty to wrestle with this. There has been no scrutiny, and if you look at the date on the back of the bundle of papers at the top there, top right, there has been some time between receiving the legal opinion and surely there would have been some opportunity in the meantime for us to be able to put this in front of the scrutiny committee if we'd really wanted to. So I very much hope that you're going to allow us to discuss this as though today, as though we had a scrutiny function, a self-scrutiny function, which we do have. My first concern is if you're only going to allow me to speak in open or in exempt, as has happened in the past, then that's a difficult choice. And I would ask to speak under the exempt session, but I would very much like to ask a couple of simple questions in open before we move into the exempt, where the real meat lies.
Can I just clarify something? In this case, the exempt item is actually a different item on the agenda to the open item, item 3. You actually registered to speak on item 3 and could have also registered to speak on item 5. I want to make this as reasonable as possible, Jerry, so I will consider for the purposes of this that you also registered to speak on item 5, and so we'll allow you to speak.
I did say that verbally when I registered, actually, so...
in which case, either way, I'm content that you can speak on both the open matter for 4 minutes and the exempt section for 4 minutes. So please go ahead.
Okay. Well, under the first session, if we can turn to page 7 of your papers, it's under legal. It gives us an explanation here of the costs and explains the £13,500 and potentially another £4,000 that it would cost us at this stage. Which is applying for judicial review, seeking judicial review and the rights to review. I'm slightly concerned here that it doesn't tell us whether in there where it says that the estimated costs of Secretary of State and UK oil and gas would be similar. It's not really telling us whether that means that it's 3 times the amount stated or twice the amount stated or what the maximum would be. And I think we have to bear in mind this is just stage 1. So we're got to look at in terms of the public purse, which is where you started, where is this likely to take us? If at the first stage here we lose, it appears to be saying we could be losing £40,000-50,000 or whatever would be the cost. It might be that
Sorry, Jerry,
25 or 30.
My apologies for interrupting, Councillor Hyman, but that is incorrect, and I just need to say that right now. The only from this particular item on the agenda, the only costs that will be incurred are the costs before you. Any further costs, so for example, if we were to pursue this further and lose and be awarded and costs be awarded against us to the other parties, that is where we would incur that kind of cost. But this particular stage, there is no other risk other than the direct expenditure that we make pursuing it to that stage.
I'm sorry, this is going to go over 4 minutes if we start like this. If we can read the paragraph that I've just referred you to, Leader, it says that in there, I mean, you can read it for yourself and it's in open. In the event the application to seek permission to challenge the SOS's decision, which is the decision you're making now to go forward in that track, if it's unsuccessful, it's likely the court will order the council to pay the legal costs of Secretary of State and UCOC. It's estimated that their costs will be similar to the council's costs. So it seems to me, and I hope I haven't misunderstood you, and I apologise if I have, but that appears to be saying exactly the opposite to what you've just told me yourself, Leader. So can I have clarification from an officer first on that, please? Perhaps Mr. Ricks.
Bear with me 1 second. Mr. Ricks, I believe you are on the call. Would it be possible for you to respond to this on my behalf?
Yes, I can, Leader. Thank you. So yes, the legal comments are correct. If the council decides to proceed with the challenge to the Secretary of State's decision, and the council's challenge is unsuccessful, it's very likely that the court would make an order that the council has to pay the costs of the Secretary of State. And I would estimate, as I said in the paper, that they would be likely to be around £13,000. In terms of UCOG's costs, it's not automatic that the court would make an order that the council had to pay those costs. It doesn't always happen with the interested parties' costs. It may do, it may not. However, if the court did make an order that the council paid UCOG's costs, then they would be at least £13,000, possibly more.
Thank you, Mr. Ricks. Any further questions, Councillor Hyman?
Well, thank you. So for clarity, for the members' clarity there, if we can go back to the original question, if you'd apologise if you were wrong there, because I think you were from what Mr. Ricks has said, and then perhaps get to asking the question regarding when we move on, what are the costs? We're looking therefore at somewhere in above 27, 30,000, could be 50,000 at this stage. From is what I think has been intimated by Mr. Ricks in saying they could be greater costs for UCOG than the council and the Secretary of State. We would then, if we were successful, we would not obviously incur the extra costs above the 13.5 and possibly the 4. That's what it's telling us here. That's if we were successful, but we would then move on to a challenge which is going to cost us a lot of money, the full challenge, and obviously that's what we're aiming to do here in taking this decision. Otherwise we wouldn't have this recommendation in front of us. And what I want to know is, in view of that, we have a report here from the monitoring officer, or that's whose name is on it, and I wondered whether the borough, I would expect the borough solicitor to be giving his support to the recommendation that's here, and I haven't got any views from him other than what I see here on page 7 in that short legal paragraph. And I'd like to know, without going into exempt yet, just in view of the amount of money and where this would end up, does the borough solicitor agree with the conclusions of the legal advice that's at the very end of our pack here, and does he fully support it as as fulfilling our public duty in all terms at this stage? Because of course this is just the investigation stage, it's not actually the extraction stage, which would be completely separate and is I think in the future. So if I could ask for clarification from Mr. Ricks as to his position in respect to the risk, if he can do so in open, otherwise cover that. Thank you very much in exempt. Thank you very much, Leader.
Mr. Ricks, do you believe you can comment in open session? And if not, I'll ask again in exempt.
I will need to advise in exempt session, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Ricks. In which case, I'll now open it to the rest of the executive, starting with Peace Clark.
As members will know, I'm a member of the Farnham Residents Group, excuse me. And as such, our mantra is people before politics. So my comments I'm about to make are not political, in fact. They are about people. And the topic today, as we know, is whether we should apply to the High Court for permission to challenge the Secretary's decision to grant planning permission at Loxley Well and authorise the associated costs. This could well be a challenge under the Town and Planning Act rather than a judicial review, but I'd like confirmation of that at some point in the meeting. My view is certainly that the Secretary of State only gave moderate weight to the AONB instead of great weight, and there is also an obvious conflict with Waverley's local plan. The Secretary of State also refers to the benefits of future extraction when the application was only for exploration. I agree with the monitoring officer's wording in our document that there are ramifications for Waverley's communities, and there is also a clear relationship with part of our corporate strategy. which is taking action on climate emergency and protecting the environment. For these reasons, I personally feel obliged to support our application for permission to challenge the decision and the necessary costs for doing so. If this fails, then it all stops there. If it succeeds, then we must decide how and if to proceed any further. I have already made it perfectly clear that I would be reluctant to support any further endeavour that exposes the council to further costs unless we have partners in doing so. And this could be Surrey County Council and or indeed others. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Couldn't agree with you more on almost all of that. I think Councillor Williams is next. At least I would imagine you are.
I would like to say a word or two, Leader. If any staff from UCOG are listening to this debate, I would like to assure them that I shall, as always when speaking on this matter, state facts and express opinions without malice, but with a genuine concern to reflect the widespread concerns about the proposed exploratory drilling in Dunsfold, and to work assiduously for the community in Waverley that I, along with the rest of us on this executive, represent. And as we meet today, as the leader has reminded us, in the midst of extreme weather conditions, symptomatic of our climate crisis, it is ironic that we are meeting to discuss a challenge to the decision of the Secretary of State to allow UK Oil and Gas, or UCOG, to continue in its quest for more fossil fuels when we need to be moving towards a world of sustainable energy and one of reducing energy consumption rather than expanding it. Like many of us, perhaps I listened to the lackluster debate yesterday evening between 5 candidates for Prime Minister, and there was, in my view, a complete lack of anything resembling a sense of urgency when the issue of climate was raised, and I find this astonishing. The decision of the Secretary of State to uphold the UCOG position is a reminder of this government, the government's utter ongoing failure to recognise that tackling the climate emergency requires a fundamental and sustained shift to sustainability, sustainable energy, and that fossil fuels must stay in the ground with no new onshore fossil fuel exploitation. But leaving aside any of the issues relating to climate change, it is very clear that from advice we've been given that there is a legal case to be answered, and a judicial review on the Secretary of State's decision would stand at the very least a reasonable chance of success. I should like to remind members of the executive that the decision of the Secretary of State to allow the drilling at Dunsfold was a decision that was made on balance of considerations, and that an application for costs against Surrey County Council in this matter was rejected. And if we read paragraph 34 of the letter of the 7th of June from the Minister of State for Housing, Stuart Andrew, now gone, we read, as we've been reminded by Councillor Clark, and I quote, "In favour of the appeal, the Secretary of State," just in parentheses here, that is Michael Gove, now gone, "affords the benefits of the gas exploration appraisal phase great weight. Weighed against this, which in my view is dependent on a flawed energy production model, are, and I quote, harm to the landscape character and appearance of the area, degrading the qualities of the setting of the AONB, and harm to local businesses." And in the conclusions of the planning inspector's report, if we look at paragraph 11.2, the main issues were cited as, and I quote, the effect on the proposal on landscape, including the AONB and the AGLV, the effect on living conditions for residential and commercial activities local to the site, including noise and disturbance, and the effect on highway safety and the suitability of the road network. And I repeat my view that the decision to allow exploratory drilling for hydrocarbons in Dunsfold is the worst possible outcome for the people of Waverley. And following public consultation undertaken by Waverley Borough Council and the numerous expressions of public concern regarding potential fossil fuel extraction in our borough, I do see it as my public duty as portfolio holder for environment and sustainability to reflect the widespread public disquiet over the proposal and reiterate the concerns of local people. And I see it as my public duty to support Waverley taking the first steps on the road to the proposed judicial review as is being proposed this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other speakers? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I would also draw attention to the fact that it was this government that scrapped the Code for Sustainable Homes. It was introduced back in, I think it was about 2006. And what a different place we might have been in now if all of those homes have been built to environmental and energy efficiency standards. There may not have been the need for this government to be even looking at fracking, but they scrapped all those. So there were no standards in place. And now we find, you know, it was classified as to be in a bonfire of red tape for development. Well, they certainly end up with maybe a different kind of bonfire now. You know, this government has shown time and time again, despite, you know, saying about, oh, you know, we've reduced our emissions and we're going for net zero. In this decision, they've shown that actually what they're more interested in doing is supporting the fossil fuel industry. We should be looking at wind farms, we should be looking at solar arrays. This government shouldn't even be looking at taking any more fossil fuels out of the ground. That aside, you know, there is a legal opinion here which states that, you know, that there are some grounds for us. And I think that it is our duty, it's our duty to the next generation as well, to ensure that we do what we can to avoid any more fossil fuels, and also to the communities we actually represent as well. Not only, you know, we do have a duty to them as well, to not only try and protect the environment, but also to protect the area that they live in as well. And from another hat that I have as well, which I think the leader mentioned, the Dunsfold Park Garden Village, you know, this will have a huge impact on that. And also, what if this is just the beginning of something? This could expand potentially, and we have to look at perhaps nipping this in the bud now, because there is no guarantee that this will be just limited to this particular area. So I think, you know, we do have a duty. We know how much it's going to cost. We know what the exposure is, and I think you know that we need to fight this one.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Leader. I'll say first of all, I agree with the comments made by my colleagues. I think this is a case we should be taking forward, and I think there is a reasonable chance of success. And that's all I want to say. I want to make some comments on legal advice, and we'll come to that. I'm slightly concerned that Councillor Simon's intervention may have created some uncertainty about the cost issue. You made it absolutely clear, and I agree with you, that to my understanding, there's no additional costs that can arise from the permission stage. And my understanding, the reason for that is that at the permission stage, it's only agreed with the Borough Council at the payment, and the court that's involved in that is that the Secretary of State and UCOG won't have any costs because they're not actually party at that stage. So that's why my understanding is that Jerry doesn't need to worry about that. I didn't think Mr. Ricks made that absolutely clear. He seemed to be talking more about the costs at the final stage. If you get through the first stage, I think it would be an idea if Mr. Ricks just confirmed that there are no potential costs arising from the commission stage. Just to put Jerry's mind up, Councillor Hyman completely at rest on that.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Mr. Ricks, in your opinion, do you believe the Secretary of State or UCOG are likely to incur costs up to the permission stage themselves that could impact us in the future?
Yes, I do indeed. They will incur costs in filing essentially what's called a defence to the claim. So yes, there will be costs to pay, certainly for the Secretary of State, potentially for UCOG, if the council fails at the permission stage.
As with all of these things, there's going to be some risk. The bulk of the cost would be incurred if we seek permission, take it forward, get permission, and then lose, effectively. Councillor Matson Merriweather, I believe, is next.
Thank you, Leader. So for me, there are two sort of things going on in my head. The first is the sort of the general question over energy policy in this country. And to pick up on something Councillor Liz Townsend said, I spent the last 3 days looking at wind turbines, literally looking at wind turbines off of the coast of North West Wales, which over the last 3 days, not one of them was turned on once on a whole wind farm. I, in my naivety, assumed that was because they were undergoing some kind of repair or maintenance. But I believe now it's simply because it is easier to turn off a wind facility than it is to turn off a coal or a gas-powered electricity generating section, which in the current circumstances seems to me to be an incredibly lazy way of running an energy market. One-dimensional and as short-term as some people seem to be capable of thinking of. So for me, you know, this does, like most of you, goes beyond the precise matter that's in front of us. In terms of the precise matter that's in front of us, I'm more than satisfied that there are questions that need to be answered, and that it would be a dereliction of our duty if we did not go to court to find some certainty over whether those questions actually have some merit. I think we've got to. It does not bind us to do anything at all, but as long as these questions remain answered, remain unanswered, I don't think that we are doing what the residents of the borough elected us to do.
I think I should also just be clear as well that while the council is pursuing this on our own at this point, officers have to map out what the full extent of the liabilities might be to go right way through the process. That's absolutely proper and correct. It is absolutely my hope, without breaking any particular confidences of other parties, that we will not be alone in this endeavour going forward. And I expect to be able to mitigate some of this cost through working with those other groups as we move forward. Can't go into a lot more detail on that today, but I would suggest that be looked out for in the coming week, probably. Any further speakers on this? In which case, before I just move to the recommendation, I will just say thank you to everybody on the executive. We've had a number of discussions about this. We all come from different places and different groups and different parties on this cross-party executive. And one of the things that makes us do is compromise and work together and listen to the arguments. And I think ultimately that makes us better as an executive. And it means that we come to decisions that everybody has thought about and everybody has contributed to. So thank you. I would also like to thank Tom Hallwood, Robin Taylor, Stephen Ricks, and also the whole of Democratic Services team for putting a number of other things on hold and for dealing with what is absolutely a fairly substantive matter in terms of governance and paperwork in a very short space of time, and we would not be here without them. In which case I shall bring it to the recommendation. So recommendation 1, the executive considers whether to apply to the High Court seeking permission to challenge the Secretary of State's decision of the 7th of June.
Sorry, Chairman, are we going into exempt?
No, Councillor Hyman, the item 3's agenda item, it has a recommendation in public. The item monitoring officer wishes to speak.
Thank you, Leader. I think you will need to go into exempt deal with the exempt matter and come back for the public.
And come back for the recommendation.
Indeed.
Understood. Right. In which case, I will move then to item 4, exclusion of the press and public. And I now do not need to read the full statement. Thank you for departing Happy's mind. We'll now shut the doors.